Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into a really significant moment recorded in 2 Chronicles chapter 7.
Right. King Solomon has just finished this huge project, the temple.
Yeah, years of work. And he's just offered this major prayer of dedication. So the big question is, what happens next? How does heaven respond?
Exactly. It's a key moment, a real high point, spiritually, politically, for the whole nation. This temple, it symbolized God actually dwelling with them.
For sure. And the text doesn't waste any time telling us the response. It sounds pretty dramatic.
Oh, it is. The source says, literally, the moment Solomon finishes praying, bam, fire comes down from heaven.
Wow, okay, fire.
Yeah, not just a little spark. It completely consumes the burnt offering, the sacrifices, everything on the altar.
Consumes them entirely.
Gone. And then, as if that wasn't enough, it says the glory of the Lord filled the temple, the whole building.
The glory, like a visible presence.
That's how it's described. A tangible sense of God's presence. The
Yeah.
fire is this clear sign of acceptance, like we've seen before in their history. But the glory.
Yeah. What about the glory?
Well, get this. The text makes a point of saying the priests couldn't even go into the temple.
The priests, the ones who are supposed to minister there.
The very same. They were physically kept out because the glory, the sheer weight of God's presence was too overwhelming. Think about that.
That's intense. It really drives home that this isn't some abstract idea, it's palpable.
Exactly. A powerful, immediate presence.
So the people outside, the Israelites watching all this, the fire, the glory filling the temple, what was their reaction?
Pretty much what you'd expect, seeing something like that. Immediate. Profound. They all saw it happen.
Right.
And they just knelt down on the pavement, faces to the ground. It's that ultimate sign of reverence, total submission, worship.
Faces to the ground. Wow. And they were saying something too, weren't they?
They were. As they were bowing, they worshiped and gave thanks. And the specific praise they used was, "He is good. His love endures forever."
His love endures forever. That phrase keeps coming up.
It does. It's like this anchor phrase, a core belief they return to, especially in moments like this. It connects this amazing immediate experience back to God's character, his faithfulness over time.
Makes sense. Seeing that, you'd want to affirm something solid. Okay, so fire, glory, people worshiping, but the dedication also involved, well, a staggering amount of sacrifice, right?
Staggering is the right word. The numbers are almost hard to grasp, but they showed just how big a deal this was for the whole nation. Solomon himself offered, wait for it,
Okay.
22,000 head of cattle.
22,000.
Cattle.
Yep. And 120,000 sheep and goats.
Whoa. Okay, 120,000 sheep and goats. That's unbelievable. Just for the dedication.
Just for the dedication. Peace offerings, dedication offerings. It was a massive national act of giving, of communion.
Scale is just mind-boggling. And there was a practical issue with all that, wasn't there? Something about the altar.
Yeah. Good point. Even the big bronze altar Solomon had built, which was impressive in its own right, it just wasn't big enough.
Couldn't handle the volume. Couldn't cope. Too many burnt offerings, grain offerings, the fat from the fellowship offerings. So Solomon actually consecrated the middle part of the main courtyard.
Like made a temporary sacred space.
Essentially, yeah. An overflow altar right there in front of the temple just to handle everything. It shows you this wasn't just symbolic. It was a huge logistical operation fueled by devotion.
They literally expanded the holy space to fit the worship.
Yeah.
That detail really sticks. And it wasn't just sacrifice, right? There was music, celebration.
Oh, absolutely. It was a whole experience. The priests were there playing their trumpets. The Levites had the instruments King David had made specifically for praising the Lord.
The ones David designed. Cool.
Yeah. And guess what phrase they were singing or playing along to?
Let me guess. His love endures forever.
You got it. That same phrase weaving through the whole event.
So you've got the sight of the fire and glory, the smell and action of the sacrifice, the sound of trumpets and music, and this declaration of God's love. It's hitting all the senses.
Totally. A full-bodied national worship moment.
And this didn't just last one afternoon. How long did this go on for?
It was an extended affair. The dedication of the altar itself took 7 days.
A full week just for the altar dedication.
Right. And then immediately after that, they rolled into observing the festival for another 7 days.
Which festival was that?
Probably the Feast of Tabernacles, since this was happening in the 7th month, so that's 14 days straight.
2 solid weeks of national focus on worship and celebration.
Exactly. And even then, they weren't quite done. On the 8th day after the 2nd week, so the 23rd day of the month overall, they held one final solemn assembly
Before finally heading home.
before finally heading home. It was a really significant period of time, nearly 3 weeks dedicated to this.
That level of commitment is something else. And how were people feeling when they finally did leave? Were they exhausted?
The text says they went home joyful and glad in heart.
Joyful and glad.
Yeah, specifically for the good things the Lord had done for David and Solomon and for his people Israel. So despite the immense effort, the overwhelming feeling was joy, gratitude for what God had done.
Okay, so that's the big public launch, you could say. Fire, glory, sacrifice, weeks of celebration, ending in joy. But then the chapter shifts gears a bit, doesn't it?
It does. After all the public events, after the temple is done, and Solomon's palace is also finished, the Lord appears to Solomon again.
Privately this time.
Seems so. It says he appeared to him at night, a second appearance following up on the one before the temple was built. It moves from the massive public event to a more direct, personal communication.
What's the message here? Is it just, good job, Solomon?
It starts with affirmation. God says, yep, I heard your prayer. I've chosen this place for myself, a temple for sacrifices. So it confirms the meaning of the fire and glory.
Okay, validation.
Validation, exactly. This place is officially chosen, but then the message pivots pretty quickly to the future. It brings up potential problems, challenges down the road. Ah, okay. Looking ahead, what kind of challenges does God mention?
He outlined some pretty serious scenarios, things that would really hit the nation hard, like what happens if he shuts up the heavens so there's no rain? Drought.
Right. Bad news for an agricultural society.
Definitely. Or if he commands locusts to just devour the land, wiping out crops.
Devastating.
Or if he sends a plague among the people, sickness, death. And importantly, these aren't framed as just random disasters. They're presented as things the Lord might do.
So, potential divine judgment linked to these calamities, which then leads into arguably the most famous part of this chapter, right? The if my people promise.
Exactly. That's the core response laid out.
Yeah.
If those judgments do happen, here's the path back. It's conditional.
Conditional on what the people do.
Yes. It's specifically addressed to my people who are called by my name. And the if involves 4 key actions. They need to 1, humble themselves.
Humility, okay.
2, pray. 3, seek my face, actively pursue God's presence. And 4, turn from their wicked ways. Repentance. So it's internal attitude, humility, and external actions. Praying, seeking, turning away from wrongdoing. A whole package.
It really is. And if they do those things, then comes the promise.
Yes.
Then I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land.
Hear, forgive, heal. Directly countering the potential judgments.
Precisely. If drought, locusts, plague hit, this is the way back to restoration. Hearing from heaven, forgiveness of the sin that likely led to the judgment, and healing for the land itself. It draws a super clear line between the people's spiritual state and their physical reality.
That's a very direct cause and effect relationship. And God also says something more about the temple itself in this message, doesn't he? Reinforcing its importance.
He does. He doubles down on the special status of this place they just dedicated. He says his eyes will be open, his ears attentive to prayers offered in this place.
So it's a designated spot for prayer access.
That's the idea. And he says, I have chosen and consecrated this temple so that my name may be there forever. My eyes and my heart will always be there. It's set apart. God's name, his attention, his heart, his focus is located there in a unique way.
Wow. So that's the promise and the conditions for the people linked to the temple.
Yeah.
But there was also a specific word just for Solomon, wasn't there? About his kingship.
Yes, the focus narrows again, this time to Solomon personally and the future of his dynasty. The condition for him is laid out just as clearly.
Which is?
If you walk before me, as David your father did. So follow his father's pattern of seeking God, doing what's commanded, observing the laws.
Walking like David. Even with David's known flaws, the core was striving for obedience.
Right. That seems to be the model. And if Solomon does that, if he maintains that faithfulness,
Then what?
then the promise God made to David gets reaffirmed for Solomon's line. God says, I will establish your royal throne. You shall never fail to have a man to rule over Israel. Solomon's personal obedience is directly tied to his dynasty continuing.
So obedience equals blessing, stability, the continuation of the promise. But there's always a but, isn't there? There was a warning, too.
Oh, yeah. A very stark warning. The flip side, the BTIF scenario.
It triggers the but if.
But if you turn away, speaking to Solomon and his successors, and forsake the decrees and commands, and go off to serve other gods and worship them.
Idolatry. Turning away from the Lord to worship other gods, that seems to be the ultimate red line.
It's presented as the ultimate betrayal. And the consequences spelled out for doing that, they are incredibly severe.
How severe?
First, God says he will uproot Israel from the land he gave them, exile.
Uproot them from the land. Okay.
Second, this very temple, the one just filled with glory, consecrated for his name, he will reject it, cast it out of his sight.
Reject the temple he just chose.
Reject it.
Oh.
And third, the land and the rejected temple will become a byword and an object of ridicule among all peoples.
A byword and ridicule.
Right.
Like a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
It's a symbol of disgrace.
Exactly. Total scorn and mockery on an international scale. And the text even adds this chilling little detail.
What's that?
It pictures people in the future, maybe foreigners, walking past the ruins of the land and the temple, totally appalled.
Seeing the devastation.
Right. And they'll ask the obvious question, why? Why did the Lord do this to this land and this temple?
And the answer.
The text provides the answer they'll give. Because they forsook the Lord, the God of their ancestors. They embraced other gods. That's why he brought all this disaster on them.
Wow. No ambiguity there. It explicitly links the potential future ruin back to breaking the covenant, specifically idolatry.
Leaves absolutely no doubt about the cause and effect presented in the text.
Man, so this chapter 7, it's a roller coaster. It starts at this absolute peak, divine fire, glory, national worship, incredible joy.
The highest of highs.
And then it lays out these incredibly weighty conditional promises for the people, for the king, and ends with this potential future of utter desolation and rejection if they fail to hold up their end of the deal.
It's packed with these huge contrasts, isn't it? The intensity of God's presence and acceptance right next to the serious consequences of turning away. It really hammers home that this covenant relationship isn't static. It needs constant tending, ongoing faithfulness.
Yeah, that initial massive display of devotion, the sacrifices, the weeks of celebration, it was amazing. But the warnings make it clear that one big event isn't enough. It's about the long haul, the consistent walk.
Right, and that idea that even this incredibly special place, the temple, chosen and consecrated,
Right.
even it could be rejected if the people break faith, that says a lot about the priority of the relationship itself over the place or the rituals.
It really does shift the focus back onto the people's hearts and actions, not just the building. So when you put it all together, that stunning beginning and the stark warnings, what does this passage really underline about how these divine covenants work? It feels like there's this incredible potential for blessing, but it's inseparable from a profound responsibility, doesn't it? Like faithfulness isn't just suggested. It's everything for the future described here.
It certainly presents faithfulness as the absolute hinge point for everything that follows, blessing or disaster.
Definitely gives you a lot to chew on from just one chapter. Thanks for unpacking that with us.
My pleasure. Always fascinating stuff.